and welcome to episode number 18 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And this is our first episode following the 2021 prospect draft. We had a very good time attending and participating in that. So we're going to dedicate the entire episode to this draft, talk about most of the picks, all the big storylines, and anything we need to know.
Yeah, there was a lot that happened over a very short amount of time. So this is going to be a nice jam-packed episode. Why don't we start out here by talking about the big trade that went down before the draft. Connor traded Willie Adames, Brady Singer, the number 4 overall pick, and Erik's 2021 third-round pick, which turned into Pedro Leon, for Spencer Howard, Jorge Polanco, Eddie Rosario, Zane and Max's 2021 second-round pick, and Zane and Max's 2023 second-round pick. That was Benintendi's Chicken Tendies giving those up, and was Zane and Max's 2021 second-round pick. Connor selected Yoelqui Cespedes. So what were your initial thoughts on that trade, Cam?
So there's a lot to unpack there. I'll start out by saying that I was very much in talks up until the last minute to acquire number 4 from Connor. And additionally, I was going to acquire Brady Singer in that deal. Unbeknownst to me, he was part of Alex's deal. So we both separately asked unknowingly if we could get Brady Singer. So I thought that was kind of funny. And yeah, I wanted 4. I was confident I could get Asa Lacy there, either Asa Lacy or maybe Austin Martin if he fell. So that would have been nice. And yeah, I could not have topped this offer. I think Connor, first of all, it was a real surprise that Connor traded the pick at all. We know he was talking about moving it, but I wasn't really certain that he would do that until he told me, I have an offer on the table. It's time for you to try and top it. But my offers with him, I would not have sent a pitcher of Spencer Howard's quality back. The shortstop swap, I would say, hurts Connor, but he also gets Eddie Rosario. The second is a little worse, and the third isn't that great. My offer, if we want to break it live on the air.
Ooh, please do.
This is one you would have been really mad about, but my offer to Connor, I was going to give him Liam Hendricks, his 2022 second, so an early second rounder, Cole Winn, and Kyle Freeland for the 4th overall pick, as well as Brady Singer.
You know what? I think one of you did tell me about that, because that's why I put the thing in the chat bashing Kyle Freeland, reminding everyone he wasn't a good starting pitcher.
I wouldn't have mentioned Kyle Freeland was in the deal until after I was out, because I knew that's what you were going to do.
It must be Connor then who told me.
Perhaps, but that would have been a great deal for me. I like Hendricks a lot. He was part of the reason my team was so great, but essentially I'm kind of loaded at closer. I feel like I could trade out of closer to get someone I need a little more. And I figured getting a top prospect as well as a really great young starting pitcher would have been great. And the early second, I don't really care about that much since I just acquired Andrew's 2022 second, and Cole Winn I cut anyway. That would have been a great deal for me, but Connor, I think, did better with the deal that he got from Alex, especially since you really like Eddie Rosario.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Eddie Rosario, but I also recognize the limitations, especially with the OBP. So I guess in breaking down this trade, it's not just about the picks. Now that we know who was taken with these picks, I think it's important to put the names to these picks. Let's look at the shortstops first. He gave up Willie Adames, and the 2021 first-round pick ended up being Ha-Seong Kim, and he got back Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco concerns me a bit because, one, he's coming off a down year because of an injury that required surgery this offseason after requiring surgery last offseason. The surgery this offseason was because they weren't able to correct it the offseason before. So I'm a little concerned there. They signed Andrelton Simmons, so Polanco is probably going to move over to second base because obviously, Simmons, elite defensive shortstop. But Royce Lewis is also going to come up at some point, and they also have guys like Luis Arias there. So maybe Polanco bounces around, gets some playing time in the outfield, whatever. But I'm willing to bet he has a little more of a super utility role as opposed to a starting job lockdown. I think Adames is just a solid player. I don't think he's necessarily anything special. I think he might be a little better in real life than in fantasy, but I think he's a solid shortstop to fill in a need for Benintendi's chicken tendies. I know their middle infield depth was getting a little low. And we'll get into Ha-Seong Kim a bit more later. I've expressed kind of some of my concerns about him on previous podcasts, but I think overall in balance, Adames and Kim outweighs Polanco there in the middle infield, so that fills a need for them. I think Brady Singer or Spencer Howard, I mean, I think they're both very solid pitching prospects. I know that Alex has personally told me that he views Spencer Howard as like a top 25 pitcher-like player moving forward. I think he's probably similarly high on Brady Singer. I don't know enough about these prospects to definitively say one is better than the other. It was nice that Howard made it to the majors this year. I believe Singer also pitched in the majors, didn't he?
Yeah, Singer's been in the majors for 2 years now.
Oh, 2 years. Okay, so there you go. That's right. I'm getting.
Oh no, just this 1 year.
I'm getting mixed up with Daniel Lynch. My apologies there.
Yeah. But, Singer and I was a little bit wrong. We were both a little wrong. Singer did make 12 starts this year, but this was his first season.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, his 12 starts were actually pretty solid because I've inquired.
They were very good
on Connor. Yeah, so I think maybe Connor probably gave up the better starting pitcher here.
Yeah, the strikeouts are a little low, but I like him.
I like him too. And then when you're looking at Eddie Rosario, I think Rosario is a solid player. I mean, Rosario and others was enough to net Brandon Woodruff. So obviously Alex and Zach view him pretty highly. And I get the outfield feels a little thinner than it has in previous years, but Rosario is kind of who he is at this point. He's a 29-year-old outfielder that doesn't hit for a high OBP, but he will get you like 30-plus homers and close to 100 ribbies. Now, the Indians lineup is a bit worse than the Twins lineup, especially now that they don't have Lindor, so maybe that drives down some of the runs numbers or RBI numbers. And I know that Connor's liked Rosario for a while. He's asked about him a lot. I don't know. I just think on balance, Benintendi's chicken tendies just did better here. I mean, obviously part of it depends on, how the 2023 second round pick is used. And a lot of it depends on how some of these prospects pan out, Pedro Leon, Heston Kim, and Yoelqui Cespedes, who I know Connor really likes. But I think Alex and Zach won this deal. I don't know if it's like a slam dunk, like they definitively just crushed Connor. I think there's some risk on their side for the players they acquired. But I think on its face, I think Alex and Zach won this deal.
Yeah, it's tough. And it is true that Adames is a better real-life player than fantasy player, but I do like him a lot. And I'm not really sure if it's fair to say that it's Ha-Seong Kim going to them, just because I don't know if that's who Connor would have taken at 4. I do think there could have been better guys that they would have taken with that 4th pick, quite a few of them. We'll talk about that. And yeah, overall, I guess I would probably say that Alex and Zach won that deal.
This isn't an easy kind of trade to look at and kind of have a definitive answer, considering there's really only a couple of established major league pieces here. Singer, Howard, and all of these picks are a little difficult to project at this point, how they're going to do and what their trajectory is. And everybody has different opinions of these prospects and these players. So I think it's hard to gauge. I think this is one of those trades where in 2-3 years, we'll have a pretty clear idea of who won and who lost. But I think it's just so hard to tell right now.
Mm-hmm. Are we ready to go into the actual draft picks?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? Torkelson at 1 is no surprise. We're not going to get into that. But number 2, Daniel and Alex took Austin Martin. We hadn't mocked Austin Martin to them. I did say for the record on draft day that I thought they were going to take Austin Martin. You thought that they were going to take Asa Lacy. So the question I have for you is, are you surprised with this pick? Do you think it's a good pick? Do you think they made the wrong decision and should have gone with Asa Lacy or somebody else there?
So it's a little tricky. I don't know if I'd say I'm surprised. I do think that Austin Martin is the second best player in the draft. I was just expecting them to go pitcher. So in that sense, I'm a little surprised, but I think they took the best player available, and that shouldn't be a shock or anything.
Yeah, I agree, especially in a draft of minor league players who just got drafted where it's going to be several years before they come up. When you're drafting that high, or just drafting in general, you're not really drafting for need because you're not going to fill an immediate major league need. You want to draft the best player available, and I think you're right. Austin Martin was the best player available. I think there's only one other player I thought you could have arguably considered there if you were going to take a hitter, and that's Zach Veen. So, and then I think pitcher-wise. I think they were right not to take a pitcher there.
Yeah, and I think it is a little harder when you just can't see any of these guys. There's a lot less information. So going maybe off script or just kind of out of order, maybe it's something that we shouldn't have necessarily picked to happen as often as we did, just because, yeah, there's not much information out there.
Well, I will say Martin had a very good junior year. No one's going to dispute that, but I think there were some concerns about him at the beginning of his senior year. He just wasn't playing as well. And I'm curious, I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, if a full minor or a full senior year of his would have elevated his value or decreased his value. So maybe this is a little riskier than it seems at first glance, but it was a very small sample size that we got before COVID shut down the season. So I think given all of the information we have, I think he was the second best player off the board. But by no means do I think this was a slam dunk pick.
Mm-hmm. So number 3, Alex and Zach took Max Meyer. That's no surprise. That's who they said they wanted to take. Yeah. But number 4, with the pick they traded for, they took Ha-Seong Kim. And that felt to me like the first real big surprise of the draft.
Yeah, I think everybody. So Connor had that pick for ages. We all along, I think we just penciled Crochet in. I think in the last podcast, we were pretty confident that like the first like 5 or 6 picks were going to go in like some order that we thought. I've mentioned multiple times before, I'm not going to get into it again, why I think Kim is a risky pick with respect to playing time and with respect to coming over from, I want to say Japan, right?
South Korea.
So South Korea, if based on what I've read, the kind of competition in that league is more about what you'd see kind of in like AA.
Yeah, that's correct. So Japan is like a quad A. And South Korea is about AA.
Right. So, there's going to be the question marks of whether that production, is going to translate over. It's essentially like calling up a prospect from AA that you feel pretty confident about and that, you're going to go in and see how he does in the majors. Not to mention all of the other hurdles of, kind of coming over from a different country and whatnot. So, well, I think this could be a good pick. I think with Cronenworth and Profar back there, maybe, the playing time might not be there. There's going to be a bit of an adjustment. I think Alex and Zach just have to be patient. But I think given their lack of middle infield depth on a major league roster, this is one of the few times where I'm like drafting for need might not have been the worst idea just because he is going to be in the majors this year. You're not looking at someone far away. And if they like him, like, look, I mean, I've seen a lot of mocks kind of have him go around this range, the 4 to 7 range. So I personally would have taken Zach Veen here if you were looking more kind of a prospect, like taking someone who's like a pure prospect as opposed to someone who's going to play in the majors. But I get the logic with taking Kim here.
Yeah, I think purely from a need standpoint, it's not a bad pick because currently they've got Nick Solak at their middle infield spot, and I'm not exactly confident that he can do anything. And yeah, I'm not super thrilled, but he could very easily turn out, well, like either of the international first rounders from last year who didn't pan out.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I remember the offseason, the Orioles signed Koji Uehara and Tsuyoshi Iwata. Man, this is really dating me. This must be like the 2009 offseason. I've been an Orioles fan for over 10 years now. But Uehara, I mean, started a couple games and he got hurt and then they moved him to the bullpen and he became a really good reliever, but, it took a little bit of time. Wada just never played in the majors for the Orioles. He got hurt. He had some other issues. I know the Twins had a first baseman they got a few years ago. Bong-Hung Kim, I think was his name, and he just totally busted. I think they signed a shortstop as well a few years back that totally busted. So it's just like, for every Yu Darvish and Masahiro Tanaka, you got guys like that. So
yeah, I'm just imagining the 2007, and maybe I'll do 2007 fake draft, the amount of trades and the big scramble to get up to number 1 to take Daisuke.
Yeah, and he had like 1 or 2 like really good seasons, and his career kind of.
Yeah, he was phenomenal in 07 and 08, I believe, and then he just completely fell off a cliff. And his peripherals were always pretty bad.
Yeah, even the 1 year he had the 2.90 ERA, he had a 4.03 FIP. Like that's over a
4.64 xFIP.
He led the league with 94 walks too. Like it was a 132 whip he did that in. Yikes. That's not good. So yeah, I think to not get too off topic here, I think the point stands. It's a risk, but like, what prospects aren't risks when you draft them? You know, even Steven Strasburg. You know, when we did the 2010 draft, you know, he could have blown out his arm. You know, I think it's very rarely you get a prospect and you're like, this is a guaranteed star. So maybe it works out for them. I'm not sure I would have made that pick at 4, but I get it.
Yeah, and they'll have, I guess, if he's not going to be good, they'll know sooner. So it'll be easier for them to move on.
Exactly. I do want to point out one thing about international free agents from Asia before we move on. Susugo was drafted number 4 last year, and I think Hae-Seong Kim's a better prospect, but that didn't go so hot. And Shogo Akiyama went 6th, and he's like okay, but he's basically...
Akiyama was really good the second half of the year. I think Akiyama is worth rostering. I think just for the OBP alone, I think he'll be fine, even though he's not going to hit for any power at all.
He should have been drafted over Bobby Witt Jr., Nick Lodolo, Alek Manoah, Jason Dominguez, Riley Green, etc.
I mean, you could make the case. You can make the case.
I don't know. He's like 33 now. He's basically Manny Margot. I think you can reasonably argue that none of them have lived up to their draft bill so far.
Yeah.
So maybe Kim might not, but we'll see. Let's move on here because I think we talked about him a lot. Yuki took Asa Lacy at 5. I think we all expected him to take Kim. I have no clue why that happened. I think one day we all just collectively decided he was going to take Kim, and we just kind of went with it.
Yeah, he's talked a little bit about Kim, and the fact that he did take Akiyama last year kind of put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, and kind of the need in the middle infield. But are you surprised Lacy was a pick here? Do you think that was the right pick? I feel like we might have different opinions on this.
Yeah, so this is one that we do have different opinions on, and we can kind of take 5 and 6 together. I like this pick a lot. I had Asa Lacy number 3 on my board, even ahead of Max Meyer. And I think Yuki getting him at 5 is very good. I'm not sure what his farm system in terms of pitchers is. I guess Matthew Allen is all right. Jackson Kowar is all right. But that's about it until he trades for Shane McClanahan. So he's a little shallow in pitchers, and he's shallow in pitchers on the major league roster too.
Oh, very, very shallow. It's like Kershaw, Maeda, Keuchel, who I don't really trust, and then a bunch of question marks.
Exactly. Although you could say that about most teams, to be fair. But God, Yuki is shallow everywhere. My God, except for catcher.
No, I mean, I've said this is a team that needs to rebuild. I mean, my not so hot take is that this is a bottom 3 team in the league that was artificially boosted up in the Rado rankings last year. I mean, you said that with Cesar Hernandez and the doubles. I think over the full course of a season, he's not a playoff team. And I love when we do this because Yuki always tells me he uses this as fuel just to get better. So I love that our opinions are actually meaning something here, just as a side note. But
that's right. Hi, Yuki.
Yeah. What's up, Yuki? Yeah, keep talking about Lacy. You think this was the right pick?
Yeah, I really do. I would have taken him over Kim. I would have taken him over Meyer. I know pitchers can be a little risky in the draft, but college pitchers they're not the riskiest. You know, it's not like he's a high school pitcher. And I think what it was, and I haven't read Moneyball in a little bit, but I believe I remember them saying that college pitchers are more reliable than high school batters. And I mean, that's Asa Lacy versus Zach Veen right there. And I mean, me personally, I'm shallow in terms of pitchers in my minor leagues. And yeah, I just like him.
Yeah. I think I would have taken Veen, and to be clear, I don't think this is a critique of Asa Lacy. I really like Asa Lacy for all the reasons that you just mentioned, and I definitely would have taken him very high. In fact, I just think I would have flip-flopped the 2 picks how they wanted to hear Lacy and Veen, because I think Veen's better than Emerson Hancock and Nick Gonzalez, Garrett Mitchell, all the guys below him. But my general philosophy is I prefer going with the hitter over the pitcher in the draft. So to answer the question the podcast poses, the pitcher or the hitter. For me, it's the hitter. But I like the landing spot for Veen in Colorado. I think that he is a 5-tool player. I get that high school players are a little riskier, but I think that just like the injury risk with pitchers, the fact that their roles could change, Asa Lacy could easily just come up and be a bullpen arm, or even if he comes up and he's just like a solid starter that might not hold value, I think it makes it a little hard to kind of keep that player early on when maybe they don't have as defined of a role. And you kind of have to figure out, okay, he's reaching the 50-inning limit. I think, just Veen to me is just someone I've really liked. I thought he was the third best prospect. I would have taken him after Torkelson and Martin. And I think that EVO got a great steal there at number 6. And again, not a critique of Lacy. I think they're both good players. I don't think Yuki could have gone wrong either way. But I think when it's a tie for me, I always default hitter over pitcher. And I think that you see that in the way that I drafted.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And then the next picks we'll talk about. Let's go briefly into Erik's picks at 7 and 8. I really like both of those picks. I guess the fact that Kim was drafted so highly means Erik was able to take Hancock and Nick Gonzalez back to back. And I think those are 2 excellent picks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, excellent picks. I think you're right. Kim dropping down means that, or Kim going at 4 means that Erik had a little bit of a choice, because I think Garrett Mitchell could have factored in there at 7 or 8 as well. I think there was a teardrop after Garrett Mitchell. I don't know what you think about that, but I think he made the right picks there. I think those would have been the best players available on my board at that point. I think maybe you could argue Garrett Mitchell has a little higher of an offensive ceiling than Nick Gonzalez does, but I think Nick Gonzalez has a little safer floor.
Yeah, and Gonzalez plays second base, which is always nice.
You wanna jump down to number 10 here?
Yeah, let's do it. So Heston Kjerstad, I feel like was a little bit of a, you said it was a surprising pick, but I feel like he made the right pick there. Just in my mind, Kjerstad was the best player left on the board. He was taken number 2 in real life, but I figured he was somewhere in the 8 to 10 range in terms of best players in that draft. I'm not sure if it was a difficult decision for Jake, but I believe it was the right one. I don't know what you think as an Orioles fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably made the right decision here. I kind of, in my mind, had Kjerstad, Hendrick, Crow-Armstrong, and Hassel kind of grouped together. I thought Kjerstad was the best of those 4. I just thought that pick was particularly interesting because I thought there was a teardrop there. And I know Jake kind of mentioned the same thing. And he was hoping one of the top 9 guys would have fallen to him at 10. So I think there are some questions about Kjerstad. I mean, I think he undoubtedly has the power. I think there are some questions about his swing perhaps, but he's going to be given every opportunity to succeed with the Orioles. And I think, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to have an Adley, Kjerstad 3-4 in the middle of the batting order for years to come. So I think that was a solid pick by them. I just thought that was a kind of an interesting one there. I think they could have gone in many directions there. So that was the only reason I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the tiers. I think I would personally put Mitchell in the second tier. So I'd say take the top 8 picks, remove Kim, and those 7 guys are tier 1.
Yeah.
And then the guys who were picked 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 were tier 2, and which personally I guess the league kind of figured that was the second tier as well, because in my mind they were the group of guys that went next. So there weren't any like other guys who joined or guys who fell further. And then maybe even Ed Howard could have been in that tier, actually. I personally, and we'll talk about him a little later, but I personally had him above Pete Crow-Armstrong on my board. So Howard is included there. So I guess he's a shock to fall. But after that, it's just a total mess.
I'll address Pete Crow-Armstrong very briefly because I drafted him. Again, without having a lot of a season to watch, I think a lot of this is kind of going based off the rankings and kind of scouting reports and stuff. I read enough about Pete Crow-Armstrong to be convinced that, he was a solid pick there. I think that he was consistently falling between 10 and 15 in the rankings that I saw. So I think to get him at 12 here was pretty solid. I've talked to people in this league who have had him in all different places in their board, as high as 10 or as low. In your cases, you've talked to some people who had him in the 20s. But I'm looking at who got picked afterwards. Hassel, maybe I would have taken over Crow-Armstrong, but I've consistently seen Crow-Armstrong ranked above Hassel. But after that, I wouldn't have taken McAble over him. I think there's some risk with the high school pitcher. I don't know if Detmers is really a great fantasy pitcher. I wouldn't have taken any of the international free agents over him. Maybe I could have considered Crochet, but I thought Crochet was going to slip even farther than 12. So, yeah, I mean, I just thought Crow-Armstrong was the best player on the board at that point. I think Hassel was the only other consideration, but I'm pretty happy with the Pete Crow-Armstrong pick. So I got no issues with that. But I also, why don't we use this as an opportunity here just to briefly discuss. I made 7 picks, and I picked up an 8th one. I picked up Daniel Cabrera, who Clayton and Jake dropped. He was the 34th pick. After trading away all my picks in this draft, I not only made all of my original picks, I reacquired 12, 24, and 36 over like the 72 hours before the draft. But I made 5 other picks, Bitsko, Austin Wells, Isaiah Green, Aaron Sabato, and Jared Kelly, Daniel Cabrera. Who would have seen that coming? That surprised even me. I had 2 picks like entering like Thursday when we did the winter meetings.
Yeah, I don't know. You just suddenly kept trading for picks, and every time I thought you were done, you'd trade for more picks. And your farm system is looking like a legitimate farm system now. It's still a lower tier one, of course, but instead of being like, oh, this is not a farm system, none of these guys are considerations except one guy has a little upside. No, you have guys that every team would trade for, and that's got to be exciting.
Yeah, I'm flattered that you, the prospects are, said that. I'm excited by it. You know, when I told you when we did the what's it called, the New Year's resolutions, you know, I mentioned that I wanted to improve the farm system. I was like, look, my farm's never going to look like yours because, you know, I'm always so intent on improving my major league roster and pouring so many assets into there. But I mentioned, you know, I wanted to have a decent core of, you know, maybe 6, 8, 10 prospects where I look at it and I'm like, you're pretty solid. Maybe I use you as trade chips. Maybe I keep some of you. I've done that on a smaller scale. You know, for example, I traded away Nick Lodolo. And, you know, I thought I got a lot of picks for him. And I ended up being able to turn him into a lot more prospects here to kind of fill out the depth of that farm system. But at the same time, I was like, Lodolo is expendable. I thought Alejandro Kirk was someone that I could keep for the long term. And you know, I've traded away a lot of prospects this offseason. I've gotten a lot of offers for Kirk, but I haven't moved him because I really think he has a bright future. So I think moving forward, of these 8 guys that I have from this draft, you know, I might not keep all of them, but I'd like to think that some of these could start building kind of a core of a minor league system here. So I'm happy. I thought my minor league team improved, but you know, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't think my major league team was close to max out or close to complete. And I'm very happy with the guys I have there. So I think a good day for the big league Yellow champs getting all these guys. And some of these guys in particular, I was really happy to get. We'll talk about Ed Howard later, as well as Jared Kelly, but Pete Crow-Armstrong was one of those guys as well. So very happy overall, but very surprised that things turned out this way. I can't believe I made more picks than anybody else.
Yeah, the question is, was this the right year to do that and go all in on picks with it being a year where you can't really scout these guys as well? Would it have been better to do it either last year, get a bunch of picks, or maybe even wait another year?
Yeah, I thought about that. I think the flip side argument of that is that a lot of people were scared to draft this year, and that I felt like I was able to get some of these picks a bit cheaper, you know, than I would have otherwise. But I also think I was able to get some good values for some of these picks, especially when you note that like 6 of the 8 players I acquired, those picks were acquired within the 72 hours before the draft when people were desperately trying to dump picks. And therefore, I thought I got pretty good values for those picks. I think perhaps one of the arguments you could have made was maybe I would have been better off using EBO's 2022 first round pick instead of taking Pete Crow-Armstrong. But I was really happy with getting Crow-Armstrong there. I thought at some point I just really needed to commit and get some draft picks here. I think I got some players that are of interest to other teams. I got some players that I really like. And I still have some of those picks for the future. You know, I still have Andrew's 2022 third round pick, for example. And I think that'll be high in the third round. And I think then I'll be able to acquire some other picks as the year goes on. So while you could argue maybe it was a bit of a risk to take some of these guys this year, just given the lack of a season. I don't mind it. I think I made some good gambles here, and I liked a lot of the players that I acquired.
Time will tell if they were good picks or if it was a good strategy at all. And yeah, the next pick that we wanted to talk about was number 16, Cristian Hernandez. Was the first Latin American international signing to go off the board. And I feel like that surprised a lot of people. And we can kind of use this as a way to talk about how 4 Latin American internationals went in the second round in the span of just a few picks.
Yeah, I did not think 4 were going to go. I thought maybe 2 would go. I've seen Hernandez and Diaz ranked as like the top international free agents on a couple of lists, and a couple of the mock drafts had him going around the 16 to like 20 range. So I'm not totally surprised that they won here. But I think in a year where there was no consensus top guy, the fact that 4 guys won in the second round here definitely surprised me. I admittedly don't know too much about these guys, but it seems like every team that took them, and in particular Yuki with Calmerans and Connor with Cespedes, seemed to have a pretty good justification for why they took them there and did their research. So I'm not going to necessarily argue with the picks, but considering some of the guys that did get passed up after particularly Hernandez and Diaz were interesting to me. Like, for example, I think I would have drafted Ed Howard over any of these international guys.
Me too.
I think Crochet probably should have gone over the international guys. I think strong argument could have been made for Austin Wells going over the international guys as well, and maybe even Nick Bitsko. So I'm a little hesitant, but again, I don't have enough information to make definitive conclusions one way or another.
Yeah, so I was definitely surprised. Cespedes, I had a second round grade on. Diaz, I had as a third round grade, and Cristian Hernandez was later third round grade. And Carlos Colmenares was not on my board at all. So it was definitely interesting to see, first of all, to see the order they went in, and second of all, to see Hernandez go all the way up at 16. That's very surprising, in my opinion. Who would have thought that Cristian Hernandez was the first Cubs shortstop to go in this draft?
I definitely wouldn't have seen it. I thought Ed Howard was a safer player. I think he's a better player. The fact that Hernandez went above him actually baffles me. One thing I want to point out, if you recall, Clayton and Jake and Alex were discussing a deal for 23, but Alex had already traded 23 to Connor. Had Clayton and Jake had the 23rd pick, because they didn't pick again the rest of the draft until 34th. I wonder if they would have held off on Hernandez there, thinking that they could have got him later, and they would have picked him at 23rd. But the only reason they picked him that high was because they didn't have that other pick. That could be that's speculatory on my end, because they were still trying to trade for like 19, 21, and 24 after they made that pick at 16. But I wonder if maybe they had him lower on their board.
That's certainly interesting. I think that could definitely be the case. And my question to you is, would Wilman Diaz have gone to Andrew at 17 if Hernandez had not gone at 16?
Perhaps. I've seen them so closely ranked together that it was just like a kind of a coin flip of like which one he would have taken first. That being said, like, can we talk about 18 here for a second? Zane and Max took Garrett Crochet. It shocks me that Hernandez and Diaz went before Crochet, because I think Crochet should have gone, honestly, higher than Detmers went. I think Crochet should have gone 15. Maybe even
I could have seen 16, but I don't. Maybe even ahead of McAble. I don't know. The order of pitchers past the top 3 is a little iffy.
I've talked to a couple of people. So I talked to Zane. Zane, as soon as Detmers was picked, he was surprised he went that high. He didn't think that Detmers was going to really be a fantasy relevant pitcher, and I tended to believe him there. I thought that Detmers was more of a late second round pick, maybe early third. Detmers was not that high on my board. I think Crochet, with the fact that he's hit the majors, he's shown that velocity. The White Sox are trying to win now. I imagine that he's going to have some sort of role there. I thought he would have been a better pick to go higher. If you want to argue Abel and Detmers are better, like, I'll give you that, but I think he definitely should have gone over Hernandez and Diaz.
Yeah, I'll say he's better than Abel, but worse than Detmers. But that's just my opinion, and it's a little tricky because he's very difficult to put a grade on. Since 2 hours before draft time, we thought he was going 4th.
I think so. I mean, we all know if he would have gone 4th, it would have been an overdraft. We just thought because Connor was picking there, he picks White Sox, he would have taken him. That being said, I was prepared to take Crochet at 19 if EBO wouldn't have taken him, and I would have been ridiculously happy to get him at 19. I'm actually kind of salty that I had the 18 pick at one point and then traded that to EBO, and then EBO eventually traded me back the 19th pick. I wish they would have given me the 18th pick. Maybe I would have taken Crochet, but I really like Austin Wells at 19. We want to talk about Calmer quickly because we're talking about him at Bitsko. We have been pretty convinced, and we didn't mention it on the air last week because he was a second round. We didn't mock the second round. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kim, but I thought we were pretty convinced that Yuki might take Nick Bitsko there at 20.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that Yuki had expressed an interest in Bitsko, and the fact that I guess he pitches for the Rays, that's something that Yuki certainly values. And maybe the fact that he's kind of a younger guy, maybe higher risk, that's something that he would lean into more than other owners, but he didn't. He passed him up and kind of expressed surprise in the fact that you took him.
Yeah, and I think he was surprised that Calmer lasted at 20. I mean, like I looked at Calmer and he gave all the comps of like, oh, he's like the next A-Rod, he's the next like whoever, right? And I'm like, yeah, but they say that about a lot of these international free agents, right? They're the next whoever, you know. It's for every one that's a hit, and even to hit, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a star. But for every one to make the majors, like 25, these like Latin American international free agents are just busts that peter out at single A. I'm not saying that as a reason to think that like Calmer was like a bad pick there, but like I think that there are better picks that could have been made there. I'll speak to Bitsko for a second, though, because I drafted him. I previously mentioned on this podcast I would prefer to draft hitters over pitchers. I thought that Bitsko, given the level of talent and given the fact that he landed in the Tampa Bay organization that's just so good at developing pitching, I thought that this was a good risk to make at pick 21. This is not the type of player profile that I would have taken at 12. I think there's way too much risk there. I think that, he's coming off the injury, but, the talent's undeniable. So to get him at 21, I think was a pretty decent value. And, given the state of my farm system, I could gamble on a couple of the high risk guys like that. So I was pretty happy with that pick. And I was pleasantly surprised Yuki didn't take him.
Yeah, I was too. Bitsko's certainly a huge upside guy, so that could pay off for you. Any other second rounders you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet?
I want to mention two picks, actually. One, I think Justin Foscue at 22 was a reach. I'm just not overly impressed with him. I think maybe he makes the majors, but I don't think he has a particularly high ceiling. I think maybe he's like a utility guy. I know you kind of expressed similar thoughts after the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't want to spend too much time on him, but Ed Howard at 24, I think that was my favorite pick in a round for me, and maybe my favorite pick overall. I can't believe he lasted at 24. I would have taken him as high as 19, but I thought that he might slip to 21. And then I was debating between him and Bitsko at 21, and everybody was kind of talking about it in the draft room. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to go high risk here and just go with Bitsko. I think he could have gone as high as 16 and I wouldn't have blinked. Or maybe a little higher than that. Like I maybe even over Detmers. You had him over Pete Crow-Armstrong and I took him at 12. So like
I was shocking. I mean, Howard was 16 on my board and Crow-Armstrong was 17. So to the fact that Howard fell 8 more spots, even with the international guys, there were still a few places. Him going after Foscue is a shock. I had him ranked. He was your 4th pick that you made, and I have him higher than any of your first 3 on my board.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I think part of playing the draft board is not just how you rank them internally, but also where you think these players are going to get picked. And for me, a couple things. One, Austin Wells, I thought was just a good hitter. I don't know if he has a great position, but I was like, he's a Yankee. Maybe someone's going to take that into account. And I
agree. Wells probably would have been taken by the time you got back on the board.
Yeah. And then I think with Bitsko, everybody was talking about him at that point. So I thought Andrew or Connor might swoop in. I know Ed Howard hadn't been mentioned. I was purposely keeping quiet on him, but boy, was I excited when he was still on the board at 24. I didn't even need to think about that one. I made that pick with no hesitation. I was excited. I mean, I don't want to like toot my own horn or be biased or whatever, but I think that pick could be the steal of the round easily.
I think so. So yeah, that'll put a bow on the second round. The third round, there's not a lot interesting to talk about. I'll talk briefly on my pick since it's my only one. Tyler Soderstrom, catcher for Oakland, third draft in a row in which my first pick was a catcher. So that's a little exciting. Hoping Adley can kind of pan out. That would be phenomenal for me. But if not, I've got Soderstrom. And frankly, I'm not convinced that Soderstrom can stick at catcher, which I think is honestly the type of catcher you want to take because the defense, who cares in fantasy? His bat is phenomenal. And whether he plays catcher or first base doesn't matter to me, as long as he's hitting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly my logic with Alejandro Kirk, and I think that's the problem with a lot of teams in this league when you're looking at fantasy catcher prospects is they fall in love with kind of the defense and the whole package. And they fail to recognize that the defense isn't going to matter. They really need to make sure they're getting someone with a good bat. And I think when you're looking at these like 50 FB guys, some of them are just really driven by the defense. I thought it was interesting that you took another catcher. That actually surprised me a little bit. But if you think he's going to move to another position, I don't blame you for making that pick, especially with Sean Murphy there, who I absolutely love. I think Sean Murphy is going to have a huge season. Maybe Soderstrom doesn't really have the potential to even play catcher there long term. So I thought it was a decent pick for where you took him. I was kind of surprised you took a catcher, given that you have Adley. Maybe there's a better use of your resources, but I'm not going to dispute it if he was the best player on your board. And I think that was a good pick there.
Yeah, he was the best player left, in my opinion. And yeah, like you said, there's no guarantee he sticks a catcher. And knowing the A's, Matt Olson will probably be gone by the time Soderstrom reaches the majors. So there's first base open.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So another guy I wanted to talk about was Jordan Nwogu. I was a little surprised Erik took him at 25.
Yeah, that feels honestly like a 2019 style pick. He's a good prospect. He's not one of the top 36 guys. It reminds me of you taking Tommy Henry last year, just a Michigan guy. Let's throw him a bone. Probably not going to hold on to this player for that much longer. And yeah, I feel like he's overdrafted because of the Michigan connection.
Yeah, I'll see what Erik had to say about him. He actually said the same thing. He was like, I just figured that since Michigan players have been taken into third in past drafts, I might as well take in him at 25. And he thinks Nwogu is a really better prospect than the previous Michigan guys who were taken. He thinks the power speed combo is already elite, but he just needs to see the hit tool. He says people say it's a 45 hit tool right now, but he's confident he'll do well because he's a really smart guy. That being said, I mean, if you think that, fine, but I think you just have to read the value. I don't think anybody was really going to take him. Maybe someone would have taken him towards the end here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky, and especially if you know Jordan personally, then I believe Erik does. Then I think that's something you can do, but also trade down.
Yeah,
there are guys available. I don't know who else would have taken him. Yuki took a different Tampa Bay starter, and that seemed like a guy he was set on. I don't know who else. Maybe Anthony took a guy who was off board. I don't know. It's hard to see Nwogu going to any of these spots.
Yeah, maybe Alex and Zach would have taken him, or maybe Clayton and Jake, instead of just randomly going with Daniel Cabrera, would have taken him.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. And speaking of Daniel Cabrera, we have the first player from this draft to be cut. It happened very early on, and you swooped right in on him, but officially the entire board is no longer yellow.
Yeah. They after they drafted him, they're immediately trying to trade him for a third round pick, and I was like, oh, maybe I'd do that. And then I was like, well, there's probably comparable guys that could pick up in free agency who weren't drafted. And I was like, all right, I'll just wait it out. Maybe they'll cut him. If they don't, he's not a huge loss. They ended up cutting him. I don't really know if I think Daniel Cabrera is this major, great prospect, but, I thought he was a better gamble than Hunter Harvey. These really major league relievers are a dime a dozen. The Orioles aren't going to get that many save opportunities. And, if Cabrera starts to do decently well, he's a Tigers prospect. Either one of the Tigers fans will take him, or I'll just want to keep him. So I figured the more dart throws I threw, kind of the better here. So.
Yeah, I mean, to speak very briefly on Cabrera, I think I'm not super excited about him, but I think he was worth drafting. He's one of the top 36 guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no need to dwell on any other third rounders, I don't believe. But is there any favorite third rounder you think? Best pick made in the third round?
Well, I'd like to bring up Garrett Kelly. I think he was, and again, biased, he was my pick, but I think Garrett Kelly has a pretty high ceiling. I've read a lot of reports that have said he could be as good or better than Crochet, that maybe the White Sox just drafted two aces. I think he was a pretty good gamble with the 36 overall pick. I know that you mentioned that you had him ready to add, like you had it typed up in the prospects Slack channel.
Yeah, I had to furiously change it to Jordan Walker.
And that was another guy I wanted to talk about, actually, because I really like that pickup for you. I know he wasn't officially drafted, but as their like technical like 37th overall pick, whatever you want to call it, I thought that was a good add by you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both did well for the 36th and the de facto 37th picks in the draft. Jordan Walker, I guess I'm double dipping in Cardinals third baseman now, but Walker's a good player. He was ranked highly on a few lists. I like him. And on my personal board, I will say I like Jared Kelly a lot. That was actually going to be my answer to that question for my favorite steal of the third round for all the reasons you listed. And of the guys who were taken in the third round, I'll say this. My board was Cade Cavalli first, then Soderstrom, then Jared Kelly, and then Jordan Walker would have been the fourth guy. So a lot of kind of off-script guys taken in the third round, but I believe we both did pretty well.
I thought so too. You know, I know that people were questioning the Crow-Armstrong pick, but I'm happy with that. And there wasn't any of the second or third round picks. I really looked at and I was like, I wish I didn't take this player. Like the board fell kind of how I wanted it for the most part. I wish Kjerstad would have fell to 12. That was part of the reason I, was interested in getting back at the end of the first round, although I made the trade after Kjerstad once. So I think that shows you what I thought about Crow-Armstrong. But I know, like last year when I walked out of the draft, I was like, I didn't really think I made any good picks. I was disappointed Boston involves like Will Wilson, Tommy Henry, and Daniel Espino. None of who are on my roster. Actually just cut Wilson to make room for this year's draftees. I traded Espino to Erik to get Nelson Cruz, so that worked out. But like, this is the first draft where I've actually felt excited about the players that I've drafted. I hope I'm going to keep some of these guys and that they'll be a big part of my farm moving forward. You know me, I'm going to be tempted to trade all these guys the minute the season starts and I perceive that there's a hole in my major league roster. But I'm really trying to make this commitment to building up the farm system a little bit and not just have the laughing stock of the league farm system anymore. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, certainly you had a very good draft. And let's use that to kind of transition into the first ever Jose Peraza Memorial Best Draft Award.
Yeah. For those of you who weren't in the league when Jose Peraza was drafted, he was the 14th overall pick.
No. He was traded for the 14th overall pick.
Traded for the 14th overall pick. Zenimax took Kyler Murray with that pick.
A little backstory. Kyler Murray had already decided to play football instead of baseball. So 14 was you're using an early second rounder on a player who is never going to play for your team, and you will immediately have to cut when Jonathan India, Matthew Liberatore, Jordan Groshans were still on the board.
Yep. That one didn't work out so well for EBO, but they did get Mize and Alec Baum in that draft, so maybe it was all right.
The fact that at that point we thought Jose Peraza was good, obviously he turned out not to be, but so that deal felt like it turned out being 0 for 0, but we really thought they gave up Jose Peraza for free.
Yeah, it was one of the most hyped trades in the league for a trade that was just so inconsequential. And I think that that's hilarious. So hence the Jose Peraza Draft of the Year award. And do you want to announce who we are handing that to?
Yes, I do. So it's only fitting that the team that drafted the best this year was the team that kind of sparked that fun debate by trading Jose Peraza for the pick to draft Kyler Murray. But the team that drafted the best is the executive batting order. And I think, first of all, just before the draft, they had 4 first rounders. They ended up trading one of them away. So you're probably thinking, obviously the team that had 3 first rounders drafted the best. But I believe they did really well all around. You like Zach Veen a little more than I did, and you think that he was a steal at 6. I think he's probably an appropriate draft pick at 6. But then Garrett Mitchell, we talked about last week. And then Austin Hendrick is a good pick at 11. And then mostly the reason for them getting the good grade is in their later rounds, actually. Garrett Crochet at 18 is a steal, and Cade Cavalli at 26 is a steal. They're two pitchers they took later on. So overall, phenomenal draft. Congratulations. And Zane will be on to accept his award in just a minute.
Yeah, no, good drafting all around by them. It's funny because when we did the mock, I felt like every good player fell to them. And I think it just worked out that exact same way. Like there was consistently like a good, clear choice, I thought, at every pick that they made. So nice job by them. I just wanted to quickly highlight some other drafts that I really liked. I thought Erik did a good job. I thought Hancock and Gonzalez, we both mentioned, were the right picks at 7 and 8. I think what knocked him down a bit for me was a Nwogu pick at 25 and Abel at 14. I think maybe there could have been some better picks, although I still think that was a pretty decent pick overall. I think we both thought Yuki did very well. Lacy at 5 was a great pick. I know you're a little higher on him than me. I thought Robert Hassel was a very good pick at 13. Cormorant and Cole Wilcox, I didn't love those picks as much, and that knocked down those drafts, or his draft for me. And I thought my draft was kind of in that second tier with them as well. I thought that kind of rounded up the top third of the drafts there. I don't know if you had anybody else that you thought was maybe worthy of consideration, but those were mine.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. Well, first of all, to talk about Zane and Max, we mocked all of these guys falling into their laps, and it very much didn't happen the way we thought it would, but it still did happen. So even in a different way than expected. But I think, yeah, you drafted particularly well, and Yuki's draft and Erik's draft were both very similar, I think, in the fact that they did exceptionally well with their first two picks. Yuki drafting Lacy and Hassel, and Erik drafting Hancock and Gonzalez, but both of them kind of falling off with their later picks. I'm not super thrilled with Yuki's pick of Colmenares at 20. I'm not super thrilled with Erik's pick of Abel at 14, although I understand that was a little tricky. And yeah, their third rounders don't impress me either. But yeah, overall, the top two picks for both teams more than make up for that. And I'm just excited to see how these guys pan out and to see a year from now which team actually drafted a little better.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to tell just how this all pans out. You know, the draft is such a crapshoot. But one last question I wanted to ask you, while we're, we mentioned that one player's already been dropped. After all of the dust settled with having to cut players to accommodate room for this draft, the 48 hours after the draft, there are only 17 players from last year's draft that are still with the team that originally drafted them. And if you want to go back a year further, that number is even less. That number is 9 plus Bryce Terang, who you have gotten back after drafting. How many players do you think are going to be left on this year's draft class with their original team like a year from now when we do next year's draft?
Ooh, that's tricky. God, I'm gonna play it safe and say maybe 20. It's tough. The third round is probably going to be almost all of them will have found new teams or have become free agents. And I can see Zane and Max probably realistically trading away 2 of their first 4 picks somehow just because they like dealing. And I mean, I can't imagine Torkelson, Martin, Meyer going anywhere, either the top 3. But I don't know, 20 sounds reasonable, I guess. It's hard to tell.
I'd say 18. I'd say exactly half, because I'd say about half of the third round is gone. I'd say maybe like 4 to 6 picks in the second round are gone. And I think like maybe 1 or 2 of the first round picks, maybe even a little more, maybe 3 have been, say, traded away. There are only 7 first round picks from last year still there.
Wow.
I'd say 18. 17 last year, 18 this year. That feels about right. But we shall see how that pans out. It's the beauty of the draft. Nobody knows how this is all going to go.
Oh, for sure. And so that concludes our draft segment. And one last thing before we go into our interviews, hoping to get this up on Monday. So you guys are listening to this. It's Monday night. The Super Bowl was last night. That was a really great game, huh, Sahil?
Oh, absolutely. Brady, Mahomes. How do you beat that? Both great quarterbacks, both with solid performances, and it was always a pleasure to watch them.
God, yeah. I mean, two great quarterbacks going at it. Points were scored, defense was played, and the team that won really looked really happy to be holding up the Lombardi Trophy, I got to say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know the quarterback has won the Lombardi Trophy, before. So, it's not the first rodeo for the quarterback, but it's nothing beats winning that Lombardi Trophy, even if you've done it, again. So.
And let's talk about the controversy in the halftime show. My God, everyone on Twitter is talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, you thought the Janet Jackson nip slip, was one thing, but that was.
But this, my God.
Pretty controversial, man. So,
oh man,
they're crazy.
All right, but yeah, fun game all around. And coming up right now, we have Zane Harding to talk about his draft. All right, we'd like to welcome back onto the show Zane Harding, co-owner of the Executive Batting Order. How are you doing, Zane?
Doing well. How about you guys?
Pretty good. So you had a pretty excellent draft a couple days ago, huh?
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely helps when you come in with as many first rounders as we had, but yeah.
Certainly makes sense. You had 4 first rounders going in. You ended up taking 3 picks in the first round. And the reason we're having you on is because your draft was so excellent that we have named you the inaugural Jose Peraza Memorial Best Draft Award. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I love the name of the award. That cracks me up. Honestly, wish Kyler Murray was still on the farm. Someday I'm going to have to add him back.
Who knows? Maybe Kyler Murray will be like, I'm done with football. DeAndre Hopkins just isn't fun enough to throw to, and I'm going to go back to baseball. And then he becomes a star for the A's.
Yeah, he's going to say Kingsbury sucks. I'm tired of my talent being wasted. Kingsbury is not even close to being as good of a leader as Bob Melvin is.
I'm taking my talents to East Bay.
That's a good one.
Anyway, so do you want to go through each of your picks one by one and kind of talk about your thought process through them?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So your first pick, you took Zach Veen. We both agree he was probably the best player available. Was there any sort of debate about taking anyone else? And if, say, Asa Lacy had fallen to you at 6, would you have taken him over Veen?
Yeah, so I was not considering Asa Lacy at the pick. But on my board, there actually was a player that was higher just by a tick, and that was Nick Gonzalez with the Pirates. And the reason that I went with Zach Veen, first and foremost, I am not one to shy away from high school players, given the nature of our league and how long, how useful these prospect slots can be. So if there's a guy that might be able to build his value in the farm, and I don't have to worry about giving him a major league slot early on, I'm going to prioritize that. But I also took Zach Veen because I know that Andrew will have trade interest in Veen. And while Nick Gonzalez would be interesting to have in my hands for trade negotiations with Anthony at some point, Andrew has Torkelson. And that was just something that we discussed during draft day. Obviously, people were sending in offers for Torkelson. But Andrew did mention that some kind of package involving Torkelson and Veen could conceivably be on the table someday. And that was the second factor for why we took him. The first factor, he was 5th on our board. Gonzalez was 4th. And Gonzalez, his composite ranking on our board was the number 37 prospect in the league. And Veen was at composite 38 and 1/3. So it was really close. The gap between these guys and the next guy on our board was decently big. Actually, we probably would have gone with Kim at this selection had he been available, especially because Max liked him a lot, but he ended up being very high on our board. So that's how we came up with Zach Veen. The third factor, obviously, is that I am a closeted Rocktober man.
Of course, Rocktober 2021. It's going to happen. Yeah, I hadn't considered the Andrew factor, but that's certainly a really, really great idea. I know we talked a little bit earlier about how the draft is kind of divided into tiers, and with a big drop off after Veen and Gonzalez, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I know me and Sahil were a little lower on Kim, but yeah, certainly a good pick.
I love that you're like thinking of these picks with respect to trade value, because that's like all I do. So I think very, very fun way to approach that. And of course, in typical EVO fashion, just thinking about trades. I'm waiting for the next like trade burst from you all.
Yeah, there's less room for a trade burst than there was at the beginning of the offseason because there's less holes that I would like to plug. But with that said, there are still, I think there are like a solid 12 prospects on our farm that I am like totally cool with being in our system as long as possible, unless somebody pays like a value that I like for them. But that does mean that there are another like 8 guys or so that I am not necessarily going, oh, I have to hold on to this guy.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. I'm kind of the same way with my farm system. And I did just look, Veen is the first ever high schooler that you took in the draft. So congratulations to you guys.
Ooh, thank you. Yeah, we ended up acquiring Riley Green for a while, but we did not take him. So kind of regret trading him away now that while we're on the topic of him, but that deal was a win-win. So
yeah, Green is going to be really solid. And yeah, with your second pick, you took another outfielder, Garrett Mitchell of the Brewers. He's a guy that on our preview podcast, we compared a little bit to Mike Trout. Do you think this is a guy that's going to be a steal for you at 9?
The big thing with Garrett Mitchell on our board was he ranked top 75 across every outlet that we were consulting, except for Fangraphs, where he has the last that we checked. They put him, I think this was the 2020 updated rankings. They had him 3rd in the Milwaukee farm with a 45 plus future value. I always keep in mind with Fangraphs, when they put that plus there, they just want to see more because they want to give him a higher ranking. But I think the fantasy value with Garrett Mitchell specifically stuck out to me. With Garrett Mitchell, the big thing that stuck out to us was, let's be honest, the league is very split on the Fantrax ratings. But they are solid, like, one to consult at the very least for fantasy rankings. And seeing him in there cracking their top 30 and then taking a deeper dive into other rankings, we were between Garrett Mitchell and the other outfielders. So when we took him, he was the highest on our board of the other outfielders besides Zach Veen and if Austin Martin has outfield eligibility, him obviously. But yeah.
That's a good pick. Great analysis about it. And it started a little bit of a run. That was the first of 5 straight outfielders taken. So you kind of set a trend there. And I believe you probably got the best of the 5.
On our rankings, we were a decent bit higher. Like there's a little bit of a gap between him and Kjerstad, who was next on our board. But Kjerstad actually ended up with the exact same composite ranking as Emerson Hancock, who went right before. So I felt pretty happy getting Mitchell there because I had him a tick above Hancock.
Interesting. I don't know about you, Sahil, but I was quite a bit higher on Hancock than either of those guys. But that's kind of interesting to kind of look into your board and kind of reconstruct it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so with your 3rd and final first round pick, you took Austin Hendrick, your 3rd outfielder in a row, and the 3rd of 5 in the draft. I guess, what do you think separates him from, say, Robert Hassel, who fell a couple picks later?
So on our board, just looking at the different sources that we consulted, I'm pretty sure Hendrick ranked higher with every single source. And then I just like the idea of him in the Reds farm system a bit more than another Padres farm system guy in such a crowded organization right now. So it was kind of between those two. Hassel had the better pipeline ranking, but that is the source that I put the least weight into. They actually don't even factor into our composite ranking. I keep tabs on them. Whereas Hendrick had stronger rankings for fantasy-centric lists specifically. Hassel was looking like Well, I can just read their composite rankings now that the draft is over for our board. Hendrick ended up having a composite ranking of number 64 prospect in the league, and Robert Hassel specifically was at 83 and a third. I would have been more inclined to take Pete Crow-Armstrong here, and if we had kept number 12, that would have been our pick. Actually, that probably wouldn't have been our pick, but I'll talk more about that in a minute, because there is one guy that was higher than Crow-Armstrong on our board that was still available. But yeah, we wanted to load up on outfielders that have good profiles for fantasy, and we got a few that play in very hitter-friendly parks.
One thing I've noticed from what you're saying is that in a year where there's no stats and there's a lot less information on guys, you're really weighing heavily on rankings from different sources and weighting what the experts are saying and what the lists are saying as opposed to what you can see with your eyes, because there really isn't anything you can see with your eyes.
Yeah, this was a tough draft to have all this capital in. It could still pay off because one of these guys might end up being like way better than we were able even to know about because we just didn't have enough information. But I did have to resort to who has a profile that would look good for fantasy, who plays like a flexible position like outfield where we have 5 guys that we have to slot in every day, and even who's going to be in an organization where they're going to get a chance to play, and when they get to that major league ballpark, are they going to be playing in like a ballpark that suits their profile? So I had to factor all that in.
Interesting. Yeah, with Hendrick, the ballpark certainly helps, but the Reds are deep, very, very deep in the outfield and not anywhere else.
Yeah, they
So
got elite outfielder Nicholas Castellanos really blocking him. But yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely right. I mean, Veen with the ballpark, Hendrick with the ballpark, Mitchell should definitely be able to come up, and like I don't think there's too many guys blocking him in the Brewers outfield. So man, it's I think these are 3 very solid outfield picks, and suddenly your outfield farm system is looking pretty nice. I mean, man, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Over half of your farm system is outfielders.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's I'm sure some of them are going to be traded at some point, but that's very interesting, kind of the divide there. You only got 3 infielders and like 11 outfielders, more than 11.
Yeah, we have 13 outfielders in our system right now. I do believe that Kirilov's profile might shift him into like first base over time, but yeah, I mean, there are certain guys that are going to come up much quicker than the others in this farm system. I mean, Hedbert Perez I don't think he's 18 yet, whereas you have Jarren Duran, who is close to 25 and is going to be playing in Boston this year, and he has a very different profile, very speed-oriented. So, yeah, we'll see some of these guys shift around, I'm sure. There are a couple guys that I'm sure I'll trade at some point, but the top part of our farm specifically, 4 of our top 6 prospects, in my opinion, are outfielders, and 3 of them are the guys that we just took in this draft.
Yeah, outfield is a position where it certainly helps to be deep at in fantasy, and Hedbert Perez specifically is a guy that I considered picking up as a free agent, but decided I didn't have any room for him, but he could be really good for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, and moving on, you originally had the 12th pick, but you traded it to Sahil for your 2022 first rounder. What was... I guess you kind of teased that there was someone you had in mind with this pick, and why did you decide that you'd rather have the next year's pick than this player?
It all came down to I had a plan coming into this draft. I was taking 5 prospects. I did not want to cut the guys that I consider to be our current worst prospect and then the next guy. And I will say that right now, if you look at our farm system, anybody that pays attention to prospects will notice that Roberto Campos with the Tigers is the black sheep of the farm, because he does not have like a top 100 rating anywhere. He's not on most boards. Like on Prospects Live's top 500, he's number 364, and that's like the only place you're going to find him ranked right now. And the thing with him is he hasn't played basically all stateside, and the thing that I am very interested in with him are just the weird reports coming out out of the Tigers beat that are saying like this guy is like, he was scouted by the guy that signed Miguel Cabrera initially, and he compared him directly to Cabrera, saying like, besides Cabrera, Campos is the best hitter I've ever seen when I went down to Latin America and scouted. So I just want to hold him until I get to see him play in stateside, especially given the fact that we have enough Tigers fans that the fact I've held him so long, I wouldn't be shocked if someone took a flyer on him. So with Campos holding down a spot in our farm no matter what, and the next guy being like significantly higher value than Campos, every other guy in our farm, I have received like a decent offer for at some point, and those offers aren't on the table right now necessarily because everybody was trying to get their prospects crunched down for the draft. So I figured I would take the pick next year, and that was trade oriented. That was maximizing the value that we can keep in our farm. I would rather not have cut one more additional prospect. But yeah, we actually ended up getting the guy that we wanted at this pick at number 18. So it all worked out.
We're going to take Crochet there. Interesting.
Yeah, I certainly like the idea of having one guy, Roberto Campos, that you just expect to shoot up the boards. I'm wondering where the disconnect is between the guy who scouted him and all of the scouting to a prospect list. But if he blossoms, and that's certainly I guess just a huge win for you that you got in on the ground floor. I know, and it's just always fun to have these guys in your own team system that you're kind of an under the radar prospect that you love. I know the Reds had a guy like this a couple of years ago, Ian Kaloa. He was a pitcher, and then he filmed himself doing cocaine and got cut and has never pitched again. So there are a couple different ways that can go.
Yeah. I will say that I want to pull up right here. I contribute to the Bless You Boys top 30 prospect rankings every year. And it's a composite list done by like 5 of us, I think. Campos comes in on our list as the composite number 28 prospect in the Tigers farm system. And I believe only 2 of us even ranked him. I have him highest in my list of Tigers prospects. And I am not going to like deviate more than like a couple slots from the other writers in our list just because it skews our results too much. So I had him 24th in the farm. One of our writers didn't have him at all. One had him 30th, one had him 27th, one had him 26th. And I just put everybody in the Tigers farm system that I've been able to watch play that I think has some semblance of potential above him, because that's the thing with Campos. There's absolutely nothing that any of us writers have seen from him yet. He's not played stateside. I think he would have gotten like his first chance at maybe even rookie ball this past year, but then the pandemic happened, and he's 17. So my hope is that he ends up being a Hedbert Perez kind of guy that pops up on lists this year after he plays in rookie ball, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll certainly see. And moving on from a guy who we have no idea what his future is to a guy who's already pitched in the majors. With your 18th pick, you teased him a little bit. You took Garrett Crochet, someone who slid a lot more than we thought he would. Talk about your decision to make this pick, and was the reason you drafted him because of the reliever comp?
That's a great question. I didn't consider that at all when I did it, but it actually fits our team very well. Garrett Crochet was, we tiered out. Well, I am the sole person doing our draft. I asked Max, like, just for general thoughts on like the guys I was about to take in advance of the draft. But Garrett Crochet was the last guy in the second tier of players in this draft for us. We tiered our draft out by guys that ended up being composite top 50. And then the next tier are guys that land between 50 and 75 in that composite ranking. Then guys that landed between 75 and 100. Then 100 to 125. Then 125 to, looks like 140. And then 140 to 150. And then 150 and up. Crochet's composite ranking for us was 74.5 repeating 3. So he was the last guy in this second tier of prospects in this draft for us. And we had him above Pete Crow-Armstrong by a hair. We had him above Robert Hassel III by a bit. I will say that if Mick Abel had been available here, I might have gone against my board and taken him. I would have also considered Cristian Hernandez, who I had as the top international prospect in this draft. But yeah, when he was available, I immediately got a message from Connor, who tried to like make an offer on the fly for the spot. And I was like, sorry, Connor, I'm taking your boy. And I would have kind of like raised an eyebrow if he had gone number 2 or number 4, because it would have been like, oh, this is a homer pick. But it wouldn't have been like a catastrophic homer pick after watching him play in the majors and seeing how he did in that initial debut. Getting him at 18, I thought, was possibly the biggest steal in the draft. I think there are a couple others that are in the conversation, but I was just like, geez, how did he fall that far? And the whole thing for our draft, in my opinion, was that in your guys' mock draft, all the right players fell to us like perfectly, because the mock had a couple guys going a bit earlier than anticipated, specifically Garrett Crochet going to somebody that has that White Sox homerism. But the reverse happened. He didn't go early. We didn't get quite the steals that we wanted early on. We did get Zach Veen, but we ended up getting him as the steal, which I was totally okay with when all was said and done. The reliever profile will fit well. If he converts Chris Sale style, then that would be a thing to be able to like start a pivot on. But I am very excited for that reliever profile with the White Sox being an up and coming team, and the fact that he has starter pedigree too, even in that profile. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly true. You can get a reliever type now, and someone who can in the future, if you do pivot back to starting, could be the next Chris Sale. That's something that's certainly valuable. I agree.
Yeah, I thought that was arguably the steal of the draft. It's pretty crazy that we mocked him to go at number 4, and I get the Connor trade, the pick that he fell at 18. I was ready to pounce on him at 19 if you didn't take him at 18. So I'm a little salty that I gave you that 18th pick, and then later got the 19th pick back from you and didn't bother ask if you give me the 18th pick instead of the 19th pick. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Like I think you could have taken him at 12 and everybody would have thought that you got a pretty good value. But the fact that you got him at 18, I think just makes it a slam dunk. And one last thing I'll add is it's interesting that you mentioned that Cristian Hernandez was someone you would have considered there if he was available, because I know Cam and I were kind of surprised that he was a top Latin American prospect to go off the board. I think we kind of expected that it might be Yoelqui Cespedes, just because he's closer to the majors and kind of has the brand name, being a Cespedes. But great pick overall by you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and your final pick, you took the guy who was number 18 on my board, one spot behind Pete Crow-Armstrong, actually, and that's Cade Cavalli. And I think personally that's a steal for you at 26. What was your thought process with this pick?
Yeah, so our thought process for this pick was Cavalli was the final guy on our board that I was interested in having, I do believe. I was messaging Sahil because I reached for Cavalli, who was 26th on our board, and Sabato was 23, and Green was 25. So when we took Cavalli, this was the only pick where I didn't take the best player available on our board. And the rationale kind of came down to Sabato didn't have a top 100 ranking from any of the sources that I consulted. He was very close on Fantrax. Isaiah Green does have that Fantrax rating that everyone got pissed about. But Cavalli, I like the fact that he's a starting pitcher specifically, because starting pitching prospects typically go for a decent amount in this league. And he is going to benefit from the fact that he's in such a bad farm system in Washington that he's going to get a little more attention as one of their only good prospects. He has a couple of top 100 rankings from different sources. Fantasy Pros had him 89, and Pipeline has him at 99. And yeah, I honestly thought that his fantasy pedigree is similar to Reed Detmers, who went early in the second round. So just felt like we were getting a good value there. It all came down to the fact that we could use another pitcher in our farm system. Right now, we are low on pitchers in our farm system. We have Matt Manning, who is in our tier 1, Garrett Crochet, who's in our tier 2, Shane Baz, who's in our tier 3, and then Cade Cavalli is just coming in to crack our tier 4. He's not as valuable to me necessarily, but I think the potential to shoot up is high there. And I think he's getting weighed down on our boards by the fact that, I mean, he's a pitching prospect. So fantasy-centric lists are going to say, hey, look out, because he is a pitching prospect that hasn't pitched in the minors yet.
Pitching prospects can be a little tricky, but I feel like it's good to balance that out and have a couple of them. And I guess, does having pitching prospects in your farm mean that you are more, I guess, willing to pivot on a dime to having more pitchers on your major league team?
The chance of the pivot happening is so low. If we have a catastrophic result from the relief pitching approach, then we'll have no choice. But if it works even decently, then it just feels like a big enough market inefficiency, given how there is a monopoly on starting pitchers in this league, that I would rather try to overpower the weird efficiency stats for pitching, which means that I could get feasibly 4 out of 6 stats in a given week if my relievers don't blow up, which will be a bit easier to do if I don't pick up Nick Whitgren to get 0 innings and 3 earned runs in a playoff game. But yeah, I'd rather go for that approach with the pitching just because it lets me put more into the offense. And given the fact that I think the league has wisened up in the past year or two, I don't think that we will see many deals that are just like people get pissed off at how well that one of us 3 got out in a deal, for example. I feel like that has been a thing in the past. I think that will be less common. It'll still happen, but I can't rely on it as much anymore. So I'm trying to sharpen up. And the prospects, the fact that I only have one starting pitcher that I'm very excited about as a starter, should say most of what you need to know right now, especially because Blake Snell has been shopped since being traded to San Diego.
That's interesting because I have just always assumed that you were going to pivot back at some point, maybe even by the middle of the season. I just thought you'd think the opportunities would just be there and you would just kind of go for it. I didn't realize just how committed you all are to the strategy, but I think it definitely makes sense considering you are right. 3 teams really hold the monopoly over starting pitchers, and if everybody's going to zig, you might as well zag to try and win the league. And I mean, it almost worked for you. You almost won a championship based off of that. And I love the Nick Whitgren mention. He's now on my roster, so hopefully he's not having a lot of those 0 innings pitched 3 earned run outings.
Yeah, the whole thing that made me want to pivot fully was just seeing how well it worked with a depleted roster that is it's not even close to what we are at right now. And we've talked about that before, but I really feel good about how we have been able to take that value that we had in our pitchers that we're just not keeping up with either of you guys, with Ruthick, and we were able to turn them into what is now our revamped offense and a farm system that I'm very happy with.
Absolutely. I think you've got arguably a top 3 farm system, certainly top 5. And with your major league roster looking the way it is, you're going to be good for a long time.
Yeah. And hopefully a couple of these prospects actually begin to actually make an impact for our team. There are certain guys that I would be surprised if we don't hold on to. Manning is so close that if he has a good start, he might end up being we might have 1 or 2 pitchers at any given time to make sure we have the innings limit. And if he is having a good season, then I would not be surprised if he becomes a full-time member of the squad. Bobby Witt Jr., I want to see how he turns out because him, Abrams, and Wander Franco, those are three guys that, man, it feels good to have one of the three. And he has a very well-rounded profile too, which I like. He's so fast. Kirilov, I hope, makes an impact and like ASAP. I acquired him with the idea in mind that he can hopefully give us either outfield or first base production in the very near future. And then the other guys are just kind of there to build value and see how they do. And if I really like them, then I'll hold on to them. There's a couple guys besides that in the farm that I do want to see how they do with our team. Guys like Duran and Seth Beer that we've acquired this offseason are close to the majors. And Seth Beer obviously has a good fantasy profile if he makes it. And Duran, we've lost a little bit of our speed from the past year or two just because we were not wasting, but using a roster spot on Malik Smith when he could keep a respectable, not even respectable, but a passable on-base percentage for all those steals. So, yeah, we are kind of trying to fuse our old approach to the farm with a practical approach a la, not quite Erik, but maybe somewhat Erik, and also a bit kind of how, like, you manage your farm, Cam.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly feel very confident with the way I manage my farm, and I think you're kind of on that path as well, and you're going to be good for a long time, hopefully, and hopefully I am too.
Yeah, I would be okay if our powers of the league just sustainably stay up here. No offense to the teams trying to climb back in, but I don't want to give up my spot.
Yeah, if it was me versus you, Zane, in the finals for the next 7 years, I would be totally okay with that.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was like a few of us for at least the next 3 to 5 years. I think there's a little bit of catching up to do.
Easily. Yeah. We've talked about on the podcast, I think Andrew's probably the farthest away. And I think we've talked about him probably being in more of a 5-year rebuild. So if everybody else kind of works things out, which is no guarantee, I think it's at least 3 years, before we see somebody else really threaten the top here. And who knows, maybe we just keep getting better. Maybe we just, I just got Tatis, right? In 5 years, he'll be like 26, 27. So
yeah, that's kind of how I feel. The fact is that all three of us have run our team since day one, and certain co-owners came in and inherited rosters that were better off than others. I mean, Ruthvik and Nick, I was kind of surprised that they were able to take Kyle's roster as far as they did. But at the same time, when you end up having Bieber and DeGrom, then you're going to have good results. And Lamet had such a big breakout Lamet was totally off my radar when they acquired him. So that was just clever. So anyone can do it. It's just going to be tougher for guys like we talk on how Andrew has a big rebuild ahead of him. It's just he inherited such a bad team, man. AJ and M-SABR had, like, in retrospect, we look back at the draft. It was fine when it happened, but it was bad.
It was worse than Connor's draft.
It was worse than Connor's draft. And when they moved forward, all the deals they made that looked like okay in the moment, most of the time, ended up being pretty bad too. So yeah, he's making progress on that roster already, though.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Connor, I really believe in the next 2 to 3 years he can be a top 4 team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has so much pitching in his farm system. I like that approach that he has made, just because there's a monopoly on the pitching right now. But if you can manage your pitchers well and get good value out of them. I mean, when he traded Urias and Luzardo to us, I think he made out very well in that deal. I would not make that deal again in retrospect, but I mean, we were able to make other deals based off of that. But yeah, if he's able to do that with the pitchers he has in his system and then use the other ones he likes to build a strong rotation, then he's doing it right.
I mean, he's got Spencer Howard now too, so there's more and more guys.
Yeah, 26-year-old Jose Barrios there too.
All right. So, any parting thoughts, Zane, on your draft or your farm system?
I just want to congratulate everybody else who was in on that draft for what I thought was by far the most well-selected draft by everybody yet. I mean, when I took Cade Cavalli at 26, there were 2 more guys on my board that I was potentially interested in. And that was pick number 26. And I had 27 guys that I was interested in. So throughout all of the other previous picks, there was maybe one pick that wasn't on my radar, and that was actually Jordan Nwogu right before at number 25. But even he was like, he wasn't high on my board, but it was just like, I'm interested in him at that selection too. So I thought it was very well drafted around the entire league, whereas the past couple of drafts, there have been some eyebrow-raising picks, even from us. So, yeah.
Other Mesa,
Kyler Murray. We've had some good ones.
I don't know if I've said this to you, Zane, but the night before the draft, I had a dream that Other Mesa was somehow draft eligible and went in the second round.
That's so good. Yeah, that Other Mesa cracked me up. We did not take that first draft seriously at all, though we did end up getting Casey Vyse and Alec Boehm. So that kind of balanced it out at the time, and we were able to get trade value out of them.
That's true, and I'm happy that Alec Boehm is a guy who you were able to trade to me, so that turned out to be a win-win. But yeah, that just goes to show that the league is getting smarter and smarter every year.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at the last year's draft too, we traded all of our picks away. And you look at the guys that went with our selections. Erik took Jason Dominguez and George Kirby. And I was just like, God, that after I saw that was a wake-up call that we needed to take the draft more seriously, especially when Sahil's pick in that draft. Andrew took Riley Green initially. It was just like, Riley Green was available at 11? That's when I realized our picks have value.
That's true. And I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. fell to 7th.
Yeah. Him going at 7 was nuts too.
Yeah, the draft is getting harder and harder every year, and I'm curious to see what it looks like next year because I've got 7 picks, and I believe you do as well.
Yep, we have, let's see, our own first, Connor's first, your first, Cam, your second, Rufik's second, Anthony's second, and Daniel and Alex's third. And of course, we have Daniel and Alex's thirds for the next 3 years.
It's amazing that you were able to make enough trades with them to get those picks.
Yeah, I think that was all in one foul swoop. That was like one big trade, if I remember right. Just for the, I'll pull it up here.
I think you traded like 3 prospects for 3 picks.
Yeah. We sent Ethan Small, Jairo Solis, and Alex De Jesus for all 3 thirds.
That feels like pretty much fair value, I guess. All 3 of those guys probably have 3rd round grades, so we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I was just like, God, if I can take 3 prospects on this farm right now that I'm like chill with, but turn them into guys I can slot into. The way I view the draft pick section of our sheet is if I can trade players and get value into there, then that's just like player slots I don't have to have a player in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's true. I traded away Clark Schmidt for the flexibility of not having to figure out what to do with him and an early 2nd rounder next year.
Yep. So now we have 7 picks in 2022, including 3 firsts. Then we have 9 picks in 2023, including 2 firsts. And then 6 in 2024 with 1 first. 7 in 2025 with 3 firsts. And then we're back to kind of normal because 2026 we have 3 picks, our own first, and then 2 seconds right now.
God, it's gonna be a monopoly.
Yeah, create a monopoly where we can find one.
Well, I had 2 picks like 48 hours before the draft, and then ended up with 7 plus Daniel Cabrera. So
yeah,
we'll see. I'm sure these picks are going to be moved like crazy in between now and then. So it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely.
For sure. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Zane. I'm sure we'll have you back at least once before the season starts. And yeah, it's always great to have you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very gracious for the Jose Peraza Memorial Award.
Yeah, excited to see if maybe you can defend that next year. You've certainly got the draft capital for it.
Yeah, just wait until we take Kyler Murray Jr.
Ooh,
we're gonna take Spencer.
Murray.
We're gonna take Spencer Rattler.
Ooh, love it.
All right, see you guys.
All right, see ya.